Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, it's so great to be here, Kim. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. Would you mind just giving everyone a quick intro, what your background is and how you started in this area of focus?
Yeah, I would love to. So I'm Victoria. I am the founder of the Edison Collective. And that company kind of came out of this. It was kind of twofold. So I've been a pediatric occupational therapist for 10 years. And I love working with kids. I will hands down take the company of children over adults any day. Um, I love doing my work and I'm good at it and it's fun and it doesn't feel like work most of the times. But what really hurt and stuck for me was when I would have such a great session with a child and then we would go back out to the waiting room or to the lobby and there's mom waiting and there's just not time the way that are in, at least in the US, very easily on an insurance-based model to sit down and now meet with the mom and tell her all the things that we're going through, what I'm seeing, how that's showing up in her everyday life with her child, and what she can do about it. And even when I've had parents come into session, it's not the same. Like I really wanted one-on-ones with both because I wanted this holistic wraparound approach. And so I was on extended maternity leave and had my little one and was like, I can't go back. I can't leave her. I just want to be with her. She's so cool. And then we also went through this massive period where I was highly sensitive. I was dealing with postpartum depression and anxiety. And I just got to a point, like at my low point, where I was like, I have so wanted to be a mom and I love being with kids, but I can't do this. Like I'm failing my daughter. I am failing at this. And all the systems that I had in place prior to motherhood did not serve me in motherhood. And so I had to like scrap everything and start over. And I'm so thankful for that experience because I had seen so many moms in that place that I was now in. And I didn't, like, it's like childbirth. You just cannot, you can read books about it all day. You can watch it happen. You can be in a delivery room, but until you have actually gone through that experience, there's this portion that's unrelatable that you cannot, like, it's such an all-consuming thing becoming a mother on every level, mentally, emotionally, physically. I mean, the hormone surges that you get are just crazy. So it was so hard because this was something that I had longed for and waited for and I built a career around, and I felt like I couldn't even do it. And so that was part of the reason for the extended maternity leave. And when I kind of got my head back up, was meeting with a therapist, I had some really good friends who were checking in on me all the time. I was like, okay, I'm taking these two things and I'm going to do it different. I'm going to do it in a way that works for the way that I want to help moms and help their kids and help their whole family, because we do have siblings and we do have dads, and I want the whole family to thrive, because families are such a, even if you, they just, they're such a launch pad for everything for the rest of our life, whether we have a whole bunch of stuff to undo from our families or we have a great foundation to start from. That's what we want for our kids, but we're all coming with all of our own baggage to the table, you know? So, and becoming a parent brings up a lot. And
Everything
so
changes. Everything.
it does. It really does. And so that's kind of going for it. So I am now working online virtually to support mainly that mother-child dyad, that primary caregiver and neurodivergent child. But when I help that core unit right there, then it expands out and ripples to the parents, to the other parent, to, family members, to neurotypical siblings or other siblings that are neurodivergent. And so we just kind of get to work out from there. So it's been really fun, and I'm super excited. And yeah, it's just been a great opportunity.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, I can sympathize and I definitely understand. I went through a pretty hard, recovery period for my daughter and had postpartum depression. And I had a toddler. And at that time, I was learning and understanding my toddler, who we were kind of noticing things were not, I don't want to use the word normal, but like that's when we started noticing things with my son. And
Yeah.
that's when we went through a lot of testing. And, so you're sleep deprived from having an infant. You're
Yeah.
already in sleep deficit when you have your child, because at the
Yeah.
later stage of pregnancy, you're not sleeping and then you have a toddler.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand all of that. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I
Yeah.
do hope that today we could talk about like parent support for neurodivergent kids when traveling, whether it is to, you know, a road trip to see family, an amusement park, getting on a plane. I'm hoping that today we can kind of provide some support to parents,
Yeah.
mothers, and like prepping your children for travel. So first, I know that you'd said that you practice OT, but a lot of like sensory goes into OT and challenges.
Yeah.
I would like to first start, to let's talk to parents that maybe don't understand what sensory processing disorder is.
Yeah.
And maybe you could give an explanation of what it is and how it affects children.
Absolutely. That's a great place to start. So, we are all sensory creatures. We're all sensory kids, parents, adults. This is how the brain takes in information from the world around us. So we have our 5 main ones, right? Our vision, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. But we also have 3 other ones that most people don't know about. And one of them is called the vestibular sense, which is our balance, and it's located in the inner ear. So, like spinning activates the vestibular sense. So sometimes we'll see kids who are neurodivergent seeking out a lot of spinning activities. It's also linear movement, so swinging or rocking in a chair. And we see that a lot sometimes with stemming, is that rocking back and forth. That is a regulation method using that. And then the rotation, so like somersaults and stuff. So that would be the vestibular one, and that helps give us reference to where we are in relation to gravity. The next one is proprioception, and the receptors for that are in the joints and in the muscles. So whenever we're having big joint contractions and so like clenching our fists is activating it, walking, jumping. So sometimes we see if you have a really high sensory seeker in this area, they're doing lots of crashing, they're running into things, they're jumping, they're skipping, they're toe walking, they're doing lots of things to activate and get enough input in that. And then the third one that most people don't know about is called interoception. So it kind of answers the question of how are you feeling? So that can be thirst and hunger, physical needs, but it can also be like internal heart rate. Can you feel how fast your heart is beating, especially when we get scared or something like that, being able to tap into that. But it also encompasses emotion. So how are we feeling, because we feel things as we go through. Are you feeling scared in this environment? Are you feeling really excited? Are those kinds of things, and being aware of those sensations and those feelings that come up. So then those are 8 different sensory systems. And then there are typically 4 different ways of processing that sensory information. So we have people that really need a lot of that sensory input from that specific system, or maybe they're really slow to warm up. So they need a lot of extra input before it's registering in the brain. Another one could be that they're really avoidant. Like a little bit of input goes a really long way. So we find that kids will really try to stay away, will do anything they can to not be subjected to that sensory input. Or you have ones that are more like bystanders. Like it's just not registering. They're not really avoiding it, but they're not really. So there's a couple different ways that we process it. So we have the different systems, the different ways of processing. And then in the brain decides what that meaning is. Is this something that is not good and it triggers fight, flight, or freeze and sends us into kind of that survival state. Is this something good and we need more of it? And the hard part is a lot of times that's not logical as what we know, especially if we as a parent are neurotypical.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why does that smell make you gag and start throwing up? You know, why does touching this food make you like, these are good things, right? Or my home, the other one is our home is safe, but there are things that can be triggers in our homes or in the classrooms that we would never consider to be unsafe, but the brain is processing the meaning differently than everyone else. And so that child is acting like they are about to be attacked,
Yeah.
essentially, by a bear or a tiger. And that's so hard to understand when you're seeing these sometimes explosive behaviors and not knowing what is going on or where is this coming from. Or the exact opposite, like where kids are like running, scrambling to get away, or running away, eloping. That's
Yeah.
really scary as a parent. Like, what just happened? Why are they running away? Um, and so when we have children who are processing those things differently, you know, as we're going, a lot of times that comes up in toddlerhood where we're dealing with really big emotions and we don't have the language. Even if your child is speaking and learning language, they can't tie in those more complex emotions. They don't have the language or the understanding yet for that. So all of these things are developing kind of at the same time. And like you said, like you were pointing out in your own story, at that toddlerhood stage is where a lot of that is coming up. And so it can just be really hard on parents. And then a lot of parents get to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, this is my life now. Like, this is what being a parent is like. And it's really an interesting place to arrive at, and different
Yeah.
people handle it different ways. And unfortunately, in my opinion, there are not enough resources and supports in place for parents dealing with that. And a lot of parents get told, oh, just wait and see, it's just a phase, you know, come back in 18 months, or no, they don't have anything, they're just, you know, really active, or they're just a boy, or they're just this. We're like,
Yeah.
no, let's talk about the sensory system and how your child, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have a diagnosis, but we can have sensory processing differences without having a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
We can just have differences, like from one person to another, whether you have a diagnosis or not, or would consider yourself very normal and typical. You can have differences. Like if we think about our preferences for music or preferences for food flavors and things like that, those are sensory processing differences. You have likes and preferences and things you don't like.
Yeah.
But when it gets into being more of a disorder is when it's significantly impacting everyday function. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I start to work with a lot of parents, is when it's interrupting those everyday things like getting dressed, eating a meal. And this is happening constantly, like not just here and there, but all the time we are dealing with this, like trying to transition from one activity to a next. Instead of it being a 5 or 10 minute thing, it's 45 minutes and it ends up in a big meltdown or something, no matter what I do. Like that's when really working alongside parents and kind of giving them some support and understanding that sensory system. How do I identify what is going on and what do I look at here and how do I support them in this? And so really coming alongside at that point and getting really clear on what we call the neurosignature. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone, kind of like a fingerprint, everyone has a neurosignature of how they process all that sensory information. And again, I think one thing that I forgot to mention is all of this information is coming in, the brain is processing, giving it meaning, and then the brain decides how to respond to that. So that's sometimes why we see such explosive behaviors or strong reactions, is because the brain has assigned this meaning to it, even if it doesn't make sense to us from the outside. That's what the brain has decided. And then it sends in motion a chain of reactions or responses that happen. And so, you know, oftentimes I am called in for referral or to come see about something because of big behaviors.
Hmm.
And so, oh, this child is being very defiant. Oh, this child is very obsessive compulsive. Okay, well, why? What's going on underneath?
Yeah.
Why are these things? And so, kind of taking it back and walking it to the very beginning where that information is coming in can be really helpful. And once parents have that knowledge, it's like, oh my goodness, like you just decoded a language for me. And
Yeah.
it makes things so much easier because you know what you're working with or against. And you can anticipate triggers and you can anticipate things because it gets really simplified that way too.
Yeah.
And so that can be a lot more digestible and easy for parents to then go, oh, okay, I know what we can do
What's
about
my goal?
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So pivoting into travel, like we said,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're taking a
Yeah.
long car ride, you're going on a plane to see your grandparents, you're going on a family vacation. How do you help prepare a parent and then in turn prepare a child to take a trip? Are
Yeah,
there
those
certain
are
steps?
great
I mean, I
questions.
know a lot of it could be case by case, but like what does that look like?
So you're right. It is case by case because every sensory system is different. But here are some of the things that I go through. So the first thing is, as parents, especially when we have children with high support needs, what is the point of this travel? Are you, let's be honest here. Do you really want that storybook vacation that you're seeing all your friends taking and you're feeling really upset about that? Like, that's okay. But let's be honest about that. Let's be upfront with what is our goal out of this trip? Or is this, we haven't seen grandma in 3 years and it's time. Like, we really need to make this happen, but I'm really scared about what that looks like. Okay, so what is the objective here? Like, what's the main goal of this travel? Then I always start with parents. What are you like when you travel? What's your style of traveling? What are the things that really bother you? Do you get really stressed out at airports? Do you get really overwhelmed with certain things? Are you a last minute packer, like kind of flying by the seat of your pants, catching that plane, like you're the last one to board kind of thing?
Yeah.
As parents, we have to make a lot of changes for our kids when we become parents, right? We have to change some of those things. And when we have a child with high support needs, and sure, many of you know this, like, yeah, I know my kid needs a lot of, but if you can't self-examine first, then we can't really prepare very well for doing this with our kids and being successful. So that we start there, and then we look at the kid. So what is their sensory blueprint? How are they processing sensory information? Do they have visual fixations and they start stimming because of all the lights, in the airport? Or do they get really overwhelmed when there's lots of people around? What does that look like? And so we kind of start breaking it down into little steps. What does airport travel look like? What would go into that to make that successful? And a lot of times as parents, you already kind of know, but when we actually sit down and break it down into little steps, then it becomes a lot more manageable. And it takes more time. It
Yeah.
takes more time to plan for things. And if you don't travel often or you haven't traveled with your children, then giving yourself lots of buffers and margin and being very clear about that. So, if you were somebody who was like, we are going to cram as many things into a week as we can, we are going to get every last penny's worth out of this, but you have a child who has high support needs, you have to figure out what's our goal of this
Yeah.
vacation? What are we trying to do here? And how do we find a way to make this work? What does that look like? And sometimes that means compromising things. And sometimes that means, instead of doing 5 activities in a day, we do one activity per day. And we have, some built-in space around that where we could pick up something and do something a little bit more spontaneous, or we just keep it calm and more simple and relaxed. And so I think sometimes like pausing to think about those things and what's best for us and what's best for our family and for our children because you can have an amazing vacation and not have to do a whole lot of things.
Everything.
Yeah.
I think like something that you mentioned there is like starting with the parents is really important because I think a lot of it related to travel is setting that expectation. Like you have to have your own expectation of what this trip is going to be also. If you were alone or with your spouse, it's probably very different than
Mhm.
bringing your children along, a high needs child, all those things. So I think expectation setting is really important and setting that goal and objective. Totally.
Yeah. And I think it makes perfect sense, but it's just not something that we slow down and stop and do
Mhm.
sometimes, you know? And so just being very cognizant and aware of what we are asking of our family members if we're planning a family vacation, I think goes a long way.
Well, also, it's like you were saying, like traveling can be very expensive. You really
Hmm.
want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth also. So I can
Yeah.
understand that side of it where you're like, I want to make sure we do all of these things. But you also have to consider like you can do all of those things, but there could be a lot of meltdowns. There could be a lot of
Hmm.
like at the end of the trip, your child saying they never want to go back to this destination again because of everything that happened. So I think,
Yeah.
again, it's like kind of thinking about all of those things.
Yeah.
Um, so, a question if you're going to take a plane ride, you're going to go
Hmm.
see grandma, you haven't seen grandma in 3 years. What is something that a parent can do to help not only prepare, but maybe in bringing for your child
Hmm.
with those high needs to help with some of the sensory issues, like going through
Sure.
TSA, getting on a plane, sitting there for 3 hours, or whatever it looks like?
Sure. So one of the things is, your preparation has to start quite a ways ahead of time, especially if
Mhm.
this is your first time traveling. So you need to become this master observer of your child and really sit down. And again, we're being very mindful about this. Like, what are the things that your child likes to do? What are the things that occupy them? What are the things that they need to calm down when they're getting overwhelmed? Those are where we start. So, what are things that help meet those sensory needs? What are things that trigger those meltdowns? So we start to be really aware of having these things in place, and then we apply them in that context. So when my daughter was 3 months old, we actually moved to Germany,
Oh,
and we lived in Germany for 2 years. And so the first summer there, so we had been there for like 6 months, and she was almost 9 months old. And I wanted to go home. I desperately missed my family. And my husband couldn't go because of work. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And this was kind of right after it just started to like catch some air from our season of burnout. And my daughter was very sensitive. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do international travel alone, but I have to do this. So I started looking at what are the things that she enjoys and needs right now. And she was in a very tactile seeking stage at that point. So the month before, I bought a couple toys that I thought would be helpful, and I tried them once or twice and then put them away for the plane. So there was a little bit of that novelty, something new to play with, but also not something completely new where I was going to pull it out and she was going to go like I hate that. So
yeah.
I knew I'd already kind of done one like practice run through of like, okay, this is going to work. The other thing I did was she was really sensitive to noise, and I wasn't sure how she would do on the airplane because she absolutely hated noise machines. And everybody's like, "Oh, as a baby, this will really help with sleep." Yeah, no, it made my daughter crazy. And so I was really worried on the plane, like you can't stop the white noise that happens being on an airplane for 10 hours. And so we started experimenting with different types of headphones and just her even being able to tolerate something on her head so that this wasn't like a shock. And that's the thing sometimes too, is that parents will introduce a whole bunch of new things on top of an already very new experience for a child and very overwhelming one if they've not been in airports. And then just kind of day of travel, like I had everything packed like 2 days before. So there's, kind of that last minute of like, did I need this or did I need that? And I actually start with packing my carry-ons first. Like, what are all the things that I think that I need? So having extra change of clothes and bags in all of my bags, in case something happens, having snacks in all of the bags. Sometimes stuff happens and you get separated. And if everything is only in one bag, all of the change of clothes or all the snacks are in this bag and something happens. So I learned really quickly, like I needed to have things spread out a little bit. The other thing is that for me, especially traveling solo, I made the decision that she could have unlimited screen time when we were traveling.
It's like all bets are off. All bets are off.
So I had toys and I had things and we rotated through, but I also, some of my expectations of things that we didn't do every day in our own home, those were different when we traveled. And so I think too, like looking at that again, what do you want out of this? I wanted us to be able to both walk off a plane and still know our names so we could get through customs, and so what was that going to take, having, and that also meant being very aware of what I needed. So I get motion sick. I have a very sensitive vestibular system. So I needed to be sure that I had things in place for me. And the other thing was I told the flight attendants when I first got on the plane, I pre-boarded so I could get set up so I could feel calm. Now it meant that I had to contain my toddler for the half an hour or 45 minutes that it takes to pre-board and all those stuff. But that was a decision that I made. I'm okay to contain her at her seats and handle that till takeoff because I want to feel settled and not rushed. And so just being, you kind of have to let's take boarding. Okay, break it down into all the steps that go into boarding. What do you want? And some parents are like, nope, we are the last one on the plane because my child is going to go crazy. Great. You know that. So do that and advocate for yourself. Tell the people at the desk where you check in, at your terminal or whatever. Like, hey, I have a child with high support needs. I want to board last. This is what we're dealing with. And that was the thing for me is when I got on the plane first with my child, I went and told them, I was like, look, I'm traveling solo as a mom. I'm not sure how she's going to do. If you could check in on me or, just if I come ask for help, like that's who I am. I'm just giving you a heads up. I don't know how this is going to go. And I have never not been met with compassion and understanding and like, hey, good luck. And sometimes the flight was crazy and the flight attendants couldn't ever check in. But like, I'll never forget one of the first ones that we took. The flight attendant went and asked a family who was sitting near me, hey, this woman is traveling by herself. If you see her needing help, because he could tell like this was a mom she had like late elementary school teenagers.
Oh.
And so she was a couple steps ahead of me, in that life cycle. And so she came over and introduced herself and was like, hey, if you need to go to the bathroom, like we'll watch her for a minute for you. And it's
so nice.
So much of the stress off to know, like, I'm not like bare knuckling it for the next 10 hours. And so asking and being okay, like, what are the things that I would want help with? What are the things that I want to do by myself? Like, I'm going to do this part and I'm okay with that. Or what are the things that like, hey, this would be really cool if I could go to the bathroom for 5 minutes by myself.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just little things like that.
The little things make a big impact.
They do.
In the end. Yeah.
They really do.
So a couple things that you said. So one, pre-boarding. So we fly Southwest a lot. Southwest, when you are going through the reservation system, they have a box that you check for cognitive needs. So we always pre-board with my son. And that is so helpful because he likes to go in, get comfortable. We check, we talk ahead of time, who's sitting by the window, who's sitting in the middle.
Yeah.
We do all of that first, but it gives him the extra time to get really comfortable in that space because he is not like those that want to board last, or the rushing. He very much likes that structure, to be comfortable. So I want to share with everyone here that most carriers have a pre-boarding for
Yes.
cognitive disabilities. So please always check that.
And
Also,
if you don't know, you can call the
yes,
airlines and ask. When you have booked, or even before you book, if you're not sure, call and ask, because there are different benefits from different airlines for things. And it's really helpful to know that
yes.
too. So
Yeah. I mean,
that's
it
another
makes a
one.
huge impact on us for sure. I mean, even though
Yeah.
we haven't taken long flights, we haven't gone international yet. I don't know if we're quite ready yet for that, but
Do you know I find them easier?
and maybe we're going to get there. I would love, my daughter's been asking to go to Japan. So that's about 11 hours for us. But,
Yeah.
we're like between 1 and 2 hours, and that's a good amount of time. He's feeling very comfortable. So again, always check
Yeah.
that with your carrier.
Yeah.
Um, I love how you said that about the carry-on and about packing that. I also want to caution people, like, be very thoughtful with the carry-on and think about things that you would need if for some reason your luggage got lost.
Yeah.
Anything that you would need, make sure you're putting it in that carry-on. That is,
Yeah.
you need one bag that has everything in it. Um, Now when we get to a destination,
Yeah.
how can we, help regulate our children, when we're getting into an environment that they are not familiar with? Whether you're
Sure.
going to like Disneyland, an amusement park, maybe you're going to Hawaii, you're on a beach, in a new environment, how can you help your kids kind of regulate and just find their comfort zone?
Sure. No, it's a great thing. So again, like we mentioned earlier, start with you.
Hmm.
You, as parents, especially as moms and the primary caregiver, we are often co-regulating around the clock with our
Yeah.
kids, right? So one of the reasons that I was so willing to jump into solo traveling internationally from early on was because I have always loved travel and I frequently travel. So I felt like, okay, I've been doing this enough that I know this is what I need. But I also know that when I arrive, it usually takes me a day or two where I just need slow
Hmm.
before I'm ready to go, especially with jet lag that we're taking into it. So when we travel, even if we're just doing domestic travel or short stints, I usually try not to pack anything into that first day because I need that space. And if I need to be able to co-regulate for her, then
Hmm.
I have to take care of me so I have the ability to do that. Because sometimes stuff happens. Sometimes your
Yeah.
flight's delayed. Sometimes, and if you have all of this stuff jam-packed from the very beginning, then you've already set yourself up for some of that frustration and disappointment. And to co-regulate from that place gets a lot harder. And
Yeah.
so, you know, the other thing to think about is your child has never done this before. So if you're freaking out because things aren't going according to plan, they're going to be freaking out like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Something's not right. But if you have built in that time and space for you, like, okay, this is what we're doing today, or you know what, our flight got delayed, but that's okay because we have, a little bit of a buffer, they're going to be like, oh, this is normal. Flights get delayed. Like, okay, so we're going to be on a different flight. So, do what I say and not what I do, but our kids do what we do. So it's hard because you have to be very kind of analytical on yourself of what do I need and how am I responding to this, because there are little ones watching you.
Victoria, I want to be sensitive to your time, and we've had such a great conversation. Any final thoughts, like you just said, like just start traveling, anything that you would share with a parent who is maybe not so sure about traveling or maybe uncomfortable with the idea?
Well, I think you have to go back to what's the reason for travel.
Hmm.
Like, not to like call you out, but if you're playing the comparison game because your best friend on Facebook is having all these amazing travel like adventures and that's what her family does, I know as a neurodiverse family member, like we see that and we do want those things.
Yeah.
And it's hard to play that comparison game, and it doesn't serve you and it doesn't serve them. But look at what's important for your family. Like, what is something that you guys can do? Maybe you don't go travel, but maybe like hikes and go like local or regional hikes is a big thing for your family. Or maybe it is travel, but it looks a lot different than what your friend is doing. Like, you have to get really clear on what you want and what is important to you and what sacrifices you're willing to make for that.
Yeah.
So I think that you kind of have to do a little digging on your own. You know, am I wanting these vacations because this is what we did as kids growing up? We always went on the annual camping trip like this. So we're going to do that. You know, is that really that important that you do that? And if that is, great. Okay, so then what do we need to do to make that successful for everyone so that everyone enjoys that? Or if this is just something that you feel like you have to do because we always did growing up, do you need to keep doing that? Do you really want to keep doing that? What would you do if you wanted to do something? Like, what would that be?
Yeah.
You know? And I think giving yourself that permission to kind of dialogue and figure out, like, what if we really enjoyed doing something, what would that be?
Mm-hmm.
What would that look like for us?
And I think also one thing I'd like to say is I've talked with other people about this, like if your budget allows, like practice, you know,
Yeah.
try a local hotel first before you are, you know, driving 5 hours or getting on a plane and staying in a hotel. Like anywhere that you can prep ahead of time and practice is going to be big, you know, it's huge. And
Yes.
on the positive side, all the impacts there, because you get to learn, you know, before you're, you know, spending thousands of dollars getting on a plane going to Hawaii or wherever it is.
Yeah. Baby steps. Absolutely. Yeah.
Victoria, where can people find you? Again, I want to be sensitive to your time, but where can people find you? Please tell me again about the Edison Collective and your socials and all the good stuff.
Yeah. So my main hangout place is on Instagram. It's _Edison_Collective, which I know it's kind of a mouthful. So that's the best place to find me. I have a couple new things coming up this summer, so that's the best place to check in. Or you can email me, victoria@theedisoncollective.com. I love hearing emails from people. And so if you are interested in something or want some more information on travel, we can connect that way too. But those are the two big places.
All right, great. Well, I really appreciate your time today. It was so great chatting with you, and I look forward to seeing all the cool things you have coming up.
Thank you, Kim, so much. I so enjoyed this.